I think we all get the feeling that something just isn't right in the world. Welcome, fellow foilers, to the Tin Foil Hat Club, where we dare to discuss all the things we don't talk about in church. And where yesterday's fiction becomes tomorrow's fact.
When you've got a government that's lying to your face, controlling the information through the media that it owns, that's not a recipe for peace in a civilization.
Atomic. The electromagnetic waves affecting our planet.
Megalithic cyclopean sites.
Anderson Cooper, intern for the CIA.
Watchers in the days of Noah.
Well, hello and welcome to the Tinfoil Hat Club. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Ben.
And thank you for joining us yet again. Well, we have another great show planned for you guys today. Another fantastic, interesting guest for the first time on our show. Before we get to that, a couple quick housekeeping procedures. So first of all, thank you guys very much. If you are joining us live, we actually can see all of your comments filtering in through the chat. So feel free to share those comments with us on Rumble, our own website, or YouTube. We will see all those come in and we will try to get to some of those and incorporate them into the show. If you are listening to this down the line, you're listening to one of the edited podcast release, and you can always join us if you would like to for all of our shows, which are taped live. And you can all go to the tfhc.com in order to find out more about that. You can even go directly to our live stream link, which is the tfhc.com/live stream. And you can find out what shows we have coming up, and you can plan on joining us over there as well. While you're there, please do sign up for the newsletter that you will see pop up when you go to our website, the tfhc.com. That will actually keep you up to date on everything we have going on the show, everything we have going on the foil. And we will also extend to you a private invitation to our fans group. You will also get an email sent to you directly, which is a coupon good for 20% off your first purchase in the merch store. If you are interested in becoming an HD member to the show, so we have 3 levels of membership starting at $5 a month and going all the way to $9. We'd encourage you to do the $9 level, which is the HD membership level, and that is going to get you ad-free access to every single show we have in our library, including our HD only shows. If you are interested in that, you can actually go to our membership website, which is the tfhc.supercast.com. You can also find that over on our website, the tfhc.com, and you can just click on members and you can find out more there. We'll also have a little QR code in the top corner of the screen that I will throw on right now, where you can scan that at any time during the show today, and you can actually find out more information. We also have a quick active sale I'm going to tell you guys about on our stuff in our merch store. The obfuscated tees and hoodies are still on sale at 20% off. So if you like this sweatshirt that I have on, honoring our friend L.A. Marzulli, you can actually head over there and find out more about that. And again, if you want to get 20% off, just use the code disclosure at checkout. So make sure you guys take advantage of that. All right, without further ado, I will introduce our guest today. So again, we're excited to have this gentleman on for the first time, and it is our new friend, Fritz Zimmerman. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him in. We'll do a quick little bio read for him and kind of do an intro there. So get our camera rearranged there. But Fritz, if you're not familiar with him, is the author of several different books. I'm just going to mention a few of them, but his most recent book is actually Ancient America, The Dark Side. He's got the Encyclopedia of Ancient Giants in North America, the Nephilim Chronicles, a couple books of those. And then his Encyclopedia of the Giants in North America is actually the result of 15 years of research that he did, pouring over 100,000 historical documents and newspaper archives in one of the country's largest genealogical libraries. So he's done a ton of research. He's also a native Hoosier, so just like us, a native Hoosier, so to the state. So he's researched a lot of stuff in the Ohio Valley here, right where we are, and we're excited to chat with him today. So Fritz, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, good to be with you. I didn't know you were fellow Hoosiers.
We're actually in Little Thorntown, Indiana, which is just not too far south of Lafayette. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or not.
Okay. Yeah. Been
Yeah,
that
man.
way.
So
All right.
that's where we
Cool.
are, dude.
All right.
So yeah, excited to talk to you today, man. So I guess just to back up a little bit and give everybody on the show who may be not familiar with you, just a quick introduction of yourself, and what kind of got you interested in this research. And we'll turn it over to you to just kind of go there.
Well, that was purely by chance. Here in Fort Wayne, where I am, Fort Wayne, Indiana, we have the largest genealogical library in the country. And I was shooting another show. It's called the Used Car Buffet. And that was going well, but my partner left. And so then I was going to do a documentary. And, I had a double major in college. I had radio, television, and I had history. And I didn't know anything about burial mounds until I was digging in some local histories, county histories. And I was fascinated by that. And I thought that would be great because I didn't know about it. I don't think anybody else would know about it either. Is that we had a lot of mounds at one time in Indiana. So I was going to go out and try to photograph some and to make a 12-year story or 15-year story. Well, now we're up to 30 years. This is like mid-90s I started this. So a couple I went to 700 sites in Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Michigan. 400 of those sites was here in Indiana. There'd never been an archaeological survey done of this state. So I went to every mound site, physically went, knocked on thousands of doors and, dealt with hundreds of mean dogs. And it was an adventure. And we photographed 85 burial mounds and earthworks in Indiana. And I think archaeologists probably know of maybe 25. And of those 85, only 3 are historic sites or registered as historic sites. So it's pathetic, what we have going on here. And nothing's preserved, nothing's recognized. Our historical societies are worthless. Archaeologists are even more worthless, except for the fact that they've dug and destroyed so much in our state and, in Ohio, West Virginia. So many mounds have been lost to the hands of the universities. And while I was doing that and going through all these county histories is where I started finding the giants. So that was just an add-on. I had no idea. And then, I think you mentioned your intro, just thousands, my gosh, just thousands and thousands of books. I was at the library so much that sometimes, because a lot of the books I needed were rare, and I would they'd let me go into the basement. And there were times I would lose track of times and I would come upstairs and the library was closed. I'd scare the hell out of some security guard. And then they'd let me out, of course, but they gave me a job there as a security at night. So since I was there anyway, and so I started getting paid to do research. So it was great.
There you go, man.
Yeah. So so that really helped, and there was just so much to go through. My gosh, every county probably has about 5 books that could maybe have some mounds, and there's 100 counties per, state, 5 states. Yeah. So, that right there is like 25,000 books. And then there was newspaper articles and, there was other, venues that I would have to go through to try to find all these. So, yeah, it's just been a long road.
Yeah. I'll incorporate one comment already. You might know this guy here. Let's see. I'm going to throw it up on the screen for you, Fritz. You might be able to see this, but let's see. So Justin says hi. So this is Justin from the Prometheus.
Oh yeah,
Lens.
I saw Prometheus.
He's over here. He's over here creeping around. So Justin's in the audience out here today. So no, man, it's fascinating. So go ahead, please.
Oh, I just saw him. His image came up for something. I don't know if it was one of his podcasts or what. And I was just thinking, I haven't talked to him in a while.
He's joining us in the chat today. But Yeah, man. So
Good.
you start digging into
Oh,
these, and
good.
you
Yeah.
start finding out about the giant stuff. And obviously, is that something that kind of pulled you in even more at that point? Yeah.
Oh, big time. My gosh, you're reading a doctor's report where, they have an 8.5 foot, 9 foot um, skeleton that they're pulling out of a mound. And, not one, but, so many counties, where this was occurring. And, you know, in the county histories that they wrote, the county history of, oh, for instance, let's see, you're around Terre Haute. What county is that over there?
Terre
Sullivan?
Haute is actually Vigo. We're in Boone County.
Yeah, we're in Boone County.
Oh, okay. Well, you would have like the history of Vigo County,
Yeah.
probably dates to about 1880s, 1890s, right around there. But all your prominent people of the county were in there, and then they might have a bibliography of them, but the county history, and an atlas would come along with that of all the property owners, which is what I use to find the burial mounds. So let's say in the county history, they would say burial mound that was 10 foot high, 50-foot diameter was once on the John McDonald farm in Liberty Township, Section 3. So in a plat map, I would get Liberty Township, look that up, find McDonald, I'd find him in the plat, Section 3, and then I would know where that mound was and then match that up with current roads and whatever. So I would know where that mound was. So that's where I would go. I would go there, find the old McDonald farm or whatever's there now, and then go to knock on doors just to see if I could get permission to go on the land. So, but in what I was getting to is that these were not a place where you're just going to make stuff up. So in the county history, usually under antiquities, and they would say that, Dr. So-and-so measured the skeleton and it was 8 foot or whatever it was. Then you have to kind of take that, as being the truth, that it wasn't just a way to sell newspapers or anything like that, that was legitimate, the legitimate history.
Interesting, man. It's kind of fascinating because, again, as I kind of started diving into all this, and you kind of, for me, it was working the rabbit hole backwards. It was understanding Genesis 6, and then you get in there, but then as you start diving in further and further, you start to find out more about what you've been digging into, which are all these mounds, right? And then ultimately, what you find is we have all of this evidence that is seemingly actively suppressed, right under our feet. Even right here in central, and southern and northern and everywhere around this Ohio Valley in the middle of the country, where we have these entities and all of these articles. And are most of the articles, do they kind of track normally up till a certain point and then this information just kind of trails off into nowhere?
Well, it does probably around the 1920s. It'll start tailing off. And a big reason for that is that a lot of these were discovered when people were first settling there, getting on their farms. So there would be a mound on the farm, and it could be in a wood line where they weren't cultivating it. And then sometimes a local church would come, and that would be their Sunday afternoons to dig into a burial mound and take large pieces of large skeleton away. Or maybe they decided that they were going to start farming a woodland, and they would just plow over the mound. Then they would get down to a point, and then they'd reveal the skeleton. So there's a myriad of different ways where the skeletons were eventually revealed. But by about 1920, they just weren't. Sometimes the guy would be digging a basement and find a skeleton, and so it's not that. Because like, why don't they find him now? It's like, well, the land isn't, as virgin as it once was. Everything's been dug up. Everything's been plowed. You're not going to just get a woodland where nobody knows about a mound. Everything's been documented. So about the 1920s, and, it's around the 1920s that university archaeology becomes more prevalent within, the paradigm of our history. And they continued the Smithsonian line of that, it's Beringia. The only people here came through Beringia are related to some people coming from Asia. There was never any people that came here on their own. So anything like, I would say, the people came here and built these geometric earthworks. Well, that wouldn't fly. That wouldn't fly in the university because it's either Beringia or it doesn't exist. So there is no diffusion. There never was any people here other than people that had links to those people coming over the Beringia land bridge.
And where was this land bridge at?
Well, it was during the Ice Age. Alaska and Asia were connected by ice. And then as it began to melt, there was so much water that was captured in the ice, the water levels were way down. So it exposed a land bridge where you could walk from Asia and then come over into Alaska, and then from Alaska into the interior of North and South America. So that is their belief. It's called the Beringia theory, that all inhabitants of North America have their roots to Asia, which is just not true. They know that through Clovis points that are almost identical to that of Solutrean, and that's European. And even the Smithsonian was pushing that for a while, but the universities never caught on. So we're back to Beringia. But we'll talk about a few things here in our talk. And when you're done listening to this, I don't think there'll be any doubt that in fact there were very intelligent people that were here and left an indelible mark on the Ohio Valley and their geometric earthworks that were made using advanced math of pi and square roots of numbers and trigonometry, surveying skills, Pythagorean triangles, and things that just you're not going to associate with Stone Age. People.
Primitive hunter-gatherers are not going to do this.
Are the mounds in Anderson? Are the mounds in Anderson? Have they been excavated and everything, or are they just? What are they?
Yes. Well, it's the main hinge is one of the few that the earthworks around it are aligned to the winter solstice and the summer solstice. But there at Mound State Park, over by the road, they were digging and they found a cavern, and in this recess, basement that was sealed. They broke the seal to it, and just the stench of rotting corpses came out. And there were 7 skeletons buried in this underground chamber. They were all large, and they had a occipital bun on the back of their head, which is a skull trait that we find with a lot of the skulls that you're going to find in the Ohio Valley. And an occipital bun is something you would generally find on a Neanderthal skull. So it's a bony protrusion in the back of the skull. And that is because, you brought up Genesis 6. We're not going to get into race. We're not going to say Europeans came, and Native American. We're not going to get into that, because what we're dealing with when we're talking about giants is we're talking about a completely different species of man. They had occipital buns. They had double rows of teeth. They were 7-8 foot tall. They had bulging brow ridges. They had sloping foreheads. They are unlike anything modern that you would associate with modern Homo sapiens. So this is a different species. We could call it Giganticus. We could call it something like that, but it's not Homo sapien. We are looking at a different species of men that would go with the biblical narrative of when the sons of God saw the daughters of men, the giants would be born. So we're introducing a completely different genetic code with these people.
Yeah. Is it your belief system that some of these people kind of arrived here obviously before the flood? Is that seemingly timeline wise, maybe that's kind of where we're at here?
No, because the Genesis 6:4 said there were giants in those days, and also after that. So that's pre-flood, post-flood, and then we have the account of giants in the Bible, the Amorites. The Amorites were pretty notoriety. They were noted as being a giant tribe, and they were a real tribe. They were real people. They controlled Babylon from 2000 BC to 1600 BC. They were noted for advanced mathematics. They were noted for advanced trigonometry, where they've studied their tablets from Babylon and said that their advanced trigonometry in some ways was more advanced than our current mathematics and trigonometry.
Wow.
So they had that skills. We know that they were surveying. They had surveying skills because people were buying land, and when people buy land, you have to survey it to make sure that everyone's land is separated correctly. But they did have mathematics, and they had a lot of the attributes that we're going to find in the Ohio Valley, and we're going to find many of the things in the Ohio Valley that we're going to find in England, like hinges and conical mounds with ditches or circles around them. And then the skeletal remains are almost identical. The mounds in England and the mounds that you'll find in the Ohio Valley, they're both archaic, somewhat primitive skulls.
Are all of these mounds for burial purposes, or are they creating mounds for ceremonial purposes as well, or is it kind of a combo pack?
I would say, I don't know, 99.9% are burials. There's only been a couple that they didn't report burials. And in those cases, it might have been a subsurface burial. So I would say, just burials. Yeah. That comes up, commemorative mound every once in a while. Now, some people are confused, though. Platform mounds, which are much later. So what you're looking at, Cahokia, or down at the Angel Mounds here in Indiana, those were not burial mounds. Those actually, the chief lived on the mound. It was not burials. But we're talking about conical mounds, and we're talking 1,000, sometimes 1,500 years earlier than that. So the time frame we're looking at, we had for the Newark henge, they did carbon-14, and that came back 800 BC.
Wow.
But because it didn't fit the archaeological timeline, they didn't publish those results. And they found some more that was 200 BC, and that's what got published. But I know somebody that was on the dig and were a part, and they saw the carbon-14 results, and they buried it, which is what they'll do. If something doesn't go with their narrative, then it's dismissed.
Yeah. How scientific, Fritz.
Yeah.
We just throw it out when it doesn't fit. It seems like solid science to me, right?
Well, when you're not scientists, but you're more political, and they're not scientists. They're political woke operatives.
Yeah. What are some other things that you've seen in your time doing this that is, clear, obvious, to use LA's word, obfuscation of stuff that, they're doing to bury this stuff? Like, what are some other things that you've seen?
Well, despite the evidence, and now what's interesting is that Hively and Horn, who like two experts, they spent years doing the mathematics of the Newark earthworks, and they're from the college there in Richmond, Indiana, but noted authorities. But they did the spacing between the large henge and the octagon, and it created a Pythagorean triangle. at Newark. And it would have required surveying skills the way it's laid out because they're, they're a mile apart. Well, just in the last year, Ball State University measured the rectangular earthwork at Winchester, Indiana, and deduced that that was constructed making 2 Pythagorean triangles. So they have, so Lepper, who's head of the Ohio History Connection, it's not societies anymore. They're Connections or the History Center. Now, if you're really on it, it'll be Center, Centre. See? So you don't have to be good at your job. You just have to call it something like a center or the History Center, not the museum, center. But then they missed out if you were a center because then they started calling everything at campus. See, not the center, it's the history campus. Yeah. So anyway, they're all horrible at what they do at their jobs. They're just, paid monkeys. They don't do anything. They don't do anything historical, but they do things like call it a different name. So anyway, these all came and they now say that there are these Pythagorean triangles that they were using to construct these earthworks. And they now say that there was a time and there was one Native American who was as smart as Michelangelo, and the one man built all of the geometric earthworks in Ohio. He knew pi. He had figured out trig, figured out surveying. Of course, Pythagorean triangles, he figured that out. But one man. And then he lived over 1,000 years. Wow. Yeah, that's what happened. According now to our universities, one man who lived 1,000 years knew some reason, it figured out trig and, pi of numbers and square roots and trigonometry and all this. He's the one that built all the earthworks. Because if you don't believe that, then you are a racist.
I hate how everything makes you racist now. It's so easy, man.
That's crazy.
So if you don't believe Tonto Angelo built all the earthworks.
You got to trade. By the way, that's a T-shirt waiting to happen, my friend. You need to trademark that one.
Yeah. Show that you are a part of the academic line. Now, to be fair, the Dakota Sioux were the Hopewell Indians. I mean, there was a Hopewell; those were Dakota Sioux. We do have effigy mounds in Ohio. Then we know that the Dakota were up in Minnesota, around Chicago. Akancia, Arkansas. That's a Dakota tribe, and the Kansas, that's Dakota Sioux, and so there was Dakota Sioux all through the Ohio Valley from the beginning, and eventually, since there wasn't a war, what happened with the giant race is they were absorbed into the Dakota Sioux people. So to say that that Native Americans never had a part in it wouldn't be fair. I mean, kidding aside with the Tonto line, but they didn't invent this or they didn't come up with it. It was a knowledge that these people had brought over here, and it's interesting that there is probably about 20 different Native American legends that talk about people that they say had superior knowledge.
Yeah, right.
And they knew this, and some they shared with the natives, some they didn't. It would depend on what tribe you were in. They said they had a book of knowledge. They said that they were the ones that constructed the mounds and earthworks in the Ohio Valley, before they had arrived. Chief Joseph, a real noted Iroquois chief, said that there was a persistent legend amongst all the tribes east of the Mississippi that at one time there was a light-skinned tribe that came from the east, and they were the builders of the burial mounds and earthworks in the Ohio Valley. So that's their history. That's their take on who these people were. So it's not being, racist against Native. I'm just repeating what their history was. So
now, as you've been going through a lot of these articles too, did you? I can't fathom that you didn't, but I would think that you would have found a tremendous amount of material along the way too that talked about the Native Americans fighting with these giants. And I mean, I think it's somewhere down in the Southwest where they supposedly cornered them into like a cave, and then basically lit the cave on fire, smoked them to death, and that. But I'm sure that's not an isolated incident. You find a lot of that as well.
Well, there's not a lot about that, except for there is that case. You're speaking about the what's the Nevada giants out there?
I can't remember either.
Lovelock, the Lovelock, the Lovelock. Now, those Lovelock skulls, those have occipital buns, and they have sloping foreheads. They have a lot of the traits, so we know those are people from the Ohio Valley. And there was some of that going on. Now, the Wallam Olam, which is an Algonquin history, would put there was a war, and if you look up through New York, Pennsylvania, on the southern tier of the Great Lakes, there's massive graveyards. Some of them have 3,000 people in them, 3,000 skeletons, and some of them were large. So that was these people. So if there was a war, it was the line of defense was the Great Lakes. And some put the Algonquins in Canada in prehistoric times. So that would have made sense. And in the Wallam Olam, it says they wanted to come south because the weather was better down here. And they talked about large people living in cities, and that would be the geometric earthworks. And they came, and that was the war. So we do have these mass graveyards.
Wow.
And I see somebody wrote.
Yeah, that's my wife. My wife, actually.
Yeah, the Shawnee. Oh, okay. Well, the Shawnee talk about the king of the mound builders was Chief Yellowhair, and he lived at the Falls of the Ohio, and he was killed there. And I've not been down there yet. Of course, the island that he was killed on is no longer there. It was flooded when they put the dams in. But it is thought to be one of the most haunted places in the country. There were so many people that were slaughtered there. And state geologists actually said they dug up 3 stone sarcophaguses that were buried. And they believe there was 50 of these skeletons that were facing the east. Of course, we know these people were sun worshipers. And there was something that went on that they couldn't get access to the land or something like that. But they did 3. And they did excavate 3 of them, and they estimated there was 50 of those right there at the Falls of Ohio. And that's one place in Indiana I have not been yet. So we decided to go down there. But yeah, Yellowhair, that's Shawnee. That's all Shawnee.
Interesting.
Legend.
Yeah, funny enough, in Small World, I think that was the name of, she'd have to say, but I think that was the name of the little town that she was actually in when she went to Oklahoma for college, was Little Shawnee, ironically enough. But that was my wife that made the comment. But yeah, so you had mentioned something else that I just want to clarify and I want to dive into a little bit, because everybody's pretty much heard of it, especially if they're from around here. But now that we have Ancient Apocalypse out there and they've kind of made it famous, you had mentioned an effigy mound. Now, obviously, an effigy mound is different than kind of the burial mounds that we're talking about. It's more dedicated to the, animal creations and things like that. And we have the most famous, probably, effigy mound, which is the Serpent Mound over in Ohio. So what do you believe that these effigy mounds have been used for and created for?
Well, that is more of it would be better to talk about like the giants religion than the effigy mounds, but those were spiritual tokens, and they probably were spiritual tokens for. I'm not going to say the serpent. I'm going to put the serpent in a different category. Over in Portsmouth, Ohio, there's something that looks like a bear. And then there was one there, and there was one a little south of the Ohio River. But then you get into Wisconsin, and there's all sorts of different, things that are, they've made effigy mounds of different animals and that. And these were probably like tribal tokens. It was their spirit animal. The way to connect to the afterlife was through different animals. And so it really is a different religion than what we're talking about. I mean, it certainly has its roots, though, with the Dakota Sioux in the Ohio Valley. And then, of course, once they got moved out, when the Algonquins moved in, then they got pushed west. And the Algonquins say that the Acancia once inhabited the Ohio Valley. And that is the, Dakota Sioux history, is that they were there at one time. Then they were moved out by the Algonquins, which is the Miami and the Shawnee and the Delaware, so they kind of came in late. But that original, religion was with the Dakota Sioux, and a lot of effigy mounds through Wisconsin and Minnesota, and in that area is probably its height. But let's talk about the Serpent Mound, because now we'll go back to the ancient. So there's like 1,000-year difference sometimes when we're talking about effigy mounds to what we're talking about giants in the Ohio Valley. You got to keep that in mind. It's not all happening at the same time. There's 1,000-year difference. Well, the Serpent Mound is aligned to the summer solstice sunset. And what's interesting is that there's 3 bends in the body. The coil of the tail goes 3 times around. And then it's also pointed to the confluence of 2 creeks. So 3 creeks. So one creek branches off into 2 more. So we have 3. So we have 333 playing out there. And then just down the road from there is Fort Hill, and that has 33 gateways. So numerologically, we have in numerology, 33 is basically it's more of a gateway means the gateway. And we can look at that. I mean, when did Christ, when he was crucified, he was 33 years old. So numerologically, that number will play of some sense. So with serpent was some sort of gateway, possibly a portal. Now, there are some crazy things that happen at the Serpent Mound. People that have just been knocked out.
Wow.
Basically, like being by themselves and somebody cold cocking them in the
Really?
back of the head, knocking them over. And L.A. Marzulli, in one of the In Search of the Nephilim series, there's a woman, and she's at this thing, and they're kind of doing a tribal dance, and she's kind of hopping up and down, and then just something hits her, and she just gets knocked out. And so I've heard that a couple times, and then some people contacted me when I was doing Ancient America, the Dark Side. There being portals, that the tail was a portal, that the mound itself was a portal. So there's been 2 times that I've gone there. Once I was with L.A. Marzulli, and there were a coven of witches that was there doing chants. So that was a little unnerving. Yeah, and well, the pagan religion is practiced by, the ancient Celts. It goes all the way back to Semiramis, who was the wife of, Nimrod and their son Tammuz. So we're about to celebrate that at Easter. So we'll celebrate the death of Tammuz. That symbolism is just too crazy. I mean, it's even worse than Christmas, actually, the pagan symbolism of Easter. Um, so those pagan religions, begin there, but it was practiced by the witches. So there is an element of witchcraft that's contained within these earthworks.
It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah, like it's seemingly too like what we've talked about. You had mentioned, I guess, to kind of dive in because we're kind of heading down the road that we had talked about before we hit record today of getting into some of the darker side of some of this stuff with the religion that I think we should talk about because it ties into the book you just mentioned. And so when you talk about the giants' religion, what specifically are you talking about when you dive into that a little bit more?
Well, this is the pagan religion, and its basis is circles and squares. It's the belief that the circle represented the spiritual world, and the square represented the earthly world. And
I have your stuff that you sent me to, Fritz. I'll just share it on the screen.
Oh, okay.
And I'll put a section here too.
And so to understand that is going to get you a lot of earthworks in the Ohio Valley are going to be a series of circles and squares. So the circle is the spiritual realm and the square is the material realm. The circle is the male and the square is the female. So it's the male and the female, God and goddess. So the pinnacle of your religion is to combine these two. And when you do that, it's called the sacred marriage of opposites, the holy union. Everything is based on that, is combining these two. So part of this is blocked out for me. But what we're looking at here, these are the Newark earthworks. And for people that are not familiar with the Newark earthworks, that circle and octagon, to give you an idea how big that is, there is a regulation-sized golf course inside of that.
Wow. Holy cow. So we're talking 18-hole golf course in here?
Yeah. Regulation. Not a par 3. Regulation size. There are no holes outside of those walls. It's all in interior. Well, it was. Now, Ohio, instead of it being beautifully manicured by a golf course, it's now been handed over to UNESCO, and I doubt it's even going to be mowed. So up until the spring, we're going to see just how bad a shape it gets in by these idiots handing it over to the globalists. So
you're talking is this now being deemed like a World Heritage Site? Is that they're on the path of doing this? Is that the gist here?
Yeah, it is.
Great.
Because it was too much for Ohio to think, well, they think it's like, well, people come from all over the world. It's like they would if you promoted it.
Yeah, right.
But why do we need foreigners to take care of our history? Yeah. We don't. So what we're looking at here is, okay, the circle attached to the octagon and the square earthwork both have equal areas. So what you're looking at is the fusion between heaven and earth. And then it's called squaring the circle. And that was regarded, it was the pinnacle of the geometrical art. If you could do this, because mathematically it's impossible to do. Because a circle, you're dealing with fractions. It's pi r squared.
Yeah.
Whereas the square, you have whole numbers.
Yeah, right.
So even though it's mathematically impossible, it can be done. So the red circle and the circle adjacent to the hinge, that's the hinge over there that's adjacent to, both have equal areas. If you place a square inside of the octagon, it has the equal area of the circle, of the hinge. So what we've done is we have fused heaven and earth. That's the sacred marriage. So we have manifested
Yeah. There's
the
Justin's
earthly into
covenant.
the spiritual. We're basically, it is like conjuring the dead.
Yeah.
So all things are possible by doing this. Now, while you would try to make them equal areas, the other thing that you could do is to make the circumference of the circle equal to the length of the sides of the square. And that's what we find. There's some writing there at this thing. You probably can't see that, but the circle is 3,700 feet in circumference. That's the green circle there. That's the hinge. And the sides of the square are 925 feet per side. So the sum total of the sides of the circle is 3,700 feet, which is equal to the circumference of the circle.
Yeah.
So that's what we were trying to do. And this is the ancient religion. This is the ancient religion of the male sun god and the female goddess of the earth and the sun, and the marriage of those two entities.
Wow.
And that plays out. And that's what's going on at Newark.
Yeah. Sorry, you started asking.
Yeah, I was going to ask, would they be buried in those then?
No.
No. Okay.
No, there are absolutely no burials anywhere on this map. Well, I don't know. There is I think that is what you see on the left is inside of the circle.
Okay.
Well, no, inside of the octagon or the circle, the green circle, there was a charnel house up there, and it represents like a bird effigy. So there was. I'm not going to say burials, but they used it as a charnel house.
What is that? Just for description for myself, even.
Okay, a charnel house is they would take the dead. They would probably put them kind of like what the Plains Indians did, and let the birds
Feast on
deflesh
them.
the bones. Then they would put them in a bundle, and they would take them to a house. And this was called the charnel house. It was in the middle of the hinge. And probably maybe May 1, they would burn it to the ground. And then they would put dirt over that. Then they would build another one on top of that. And then maybe like on October 31st for Salmon, they would, make contact with those dead, maybe burn it again, or maybe just reburn it in May. So it was a progression of burials in the house, burning the house, building another one on top of that. And then, they would form it either into a conical mound. And this way it was a bird effigy. So both of the wings were like long charnel houses. So just a place to keep the dead. It was a religion of the dead. That was a religion. They worshiped their ancestors. And in the book of Enoch, it says of the giant race, it said, their spirits shall be earthbound.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's their punishment.
Which is what we find with the burial mounds in Ohio. These are earthbound spirits. So they're there.
Wow.
And brief foray into, I was getting started. We got kind of messed up, but we were doing paranormal investigations here at this earthwork sites, and it was pretty incredible. Of what we were finding is that when we were at the large hinge, nothing happens inside of the hinge, but outside of the hinge is crazy. So here's an instance too. We're going to do a couple slides away. We're going to see, what this was built
Sure. You want me to go
for.
ahead and advance?
And
okay.
Sure.
Oh, here's your triangle. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a Pythagorean triangle, 3, 4, 5 in length. From the middle of the octagon to the middle of the hinge is where you're getting that. And then we're using our true north and true west. Now this was discovered by Hively and Horham. It's Earlham College over there in Richmond, Indiana. But these are the the utmost experts on the Newark earthworks, and so their research is kind of has been accepted. So this isn't me drawing a line on a Squire and Davis map.
Yeah.
This has been researched by guys that dedicated their life. They've got like 20 years in surveying and doing what this map is showing right here. So now the question is, do you believe that this is Native American, or was this brought over here by a people who we know, one, were large in size and had this knowledge, and that would have been the Amorites of Babylon, the Amorites of the Levant. Most of the Amorite burial mounds and some of their megalithic sites are along the Jordan River, on the west side of the Jordan River. And there's constant interaction between Amorites and biblical characters.
And I assume we see a similarity, obviously, between what we're seeing here and then what we're seeing over in Israel and Jordan.
Well, now there are burial mounds that have stone circles around them. There are stone circles. We talk about stone circles in the Bible. That megalithic era. Who was it? There was one character in the Bible, I can't think of his name, but they were talking about him worshiping the stone, and it was a stone pillar. Well, stone pillar, that's all megalithic. There is some insight into the megalithic world. While, academia will say, well, we have no idea, what was going on at the sites, but it's pretty graphic about, what they were doing at the sites if you read the Bible.
Yeah.
So it's revealed there. It's not Jonah. What was the guy's name? But anyway, the guy with the stone, but he was worshipped the stone. They poured oils or something on it and stuff like that. Talking about different monuments, and God says, build me an altar of stone. Let no hammer or chisel touch it, lest he ruin it, meaning make it out of whole stones, not chisel stone. So, there was in the early Bible, they were somewhat involved in the megalithic era and building megalithic altars. But this is much later. We got 1,500 years down the road, but we're still dealing with the same people. But here we have the Pythagorean 3, 4, 5, and to back up, I had mentioned this before at the Winchester, Indiana earthwork. That was 2 Pythagorean triangles that were used in its construction, and that was found by Ball State University. So again, they're just, have a problem because, they can't say, well, yeah, somebody else must have come over here and done that, because to be woke, they have to be Native Americans, even though really not.
And again, just to clarify, make sure I heard you right earlier. Just make sure I heard you right. The theory now is there is one magic Native American man that decided to figure out all of this complex math, and he lived for 1,000 years and directed all the building of these magical sites. That's the current theory. I will say this for them. At least they're on board with somebody living 1,000 years. We can give them that at least, Fritz. Give them that.
And every December 25th, this man that invented all this knowledge and all these earthworks, dressed in a red outfit and brought presents to all the children in one night.
Oh my goodness. Oh, this is crazy, man.
So they just backed themselves in the corner, because when I revealed this map, I was attacked,
I'm sure,
viciously by academia. Even though this was Hively and Horn, they were on board with Hively and Horn yet. But then I don't know, for some reason, Ohio Historical Connection went in on it. Now Ball State's found another one. You have one thing you could say, like, okay, maybe
you're going to find more of it.
But when you find 2, okay, now we have something. So now we have 2 of those. They just can't, because they're woke, Jew-hating academia.
I assume the whole UNESCO angle is to basically come in and put this magic UNESCO heritage site, drizzle this over it so no one will come in and look at it, and we don't want to touch it because is that the gist of why we're doing this to this place?
Yeah, I believe so. The globalists are taking it over. And I don't know what, and I have no idea what their line is going to be on its heritage. But Now, well, earlier today I did L.A. Marzulli's.
Oh, that's what you were doing earlier.
podcast.
Okay, you didn't say what it was. It just,
Now,
you said you were doing something.
so he's now promoting this, and then we were in Newark a year ago shooting about all the math and all the other stuff. So that video is coming out in a couple of months. So this stuff with the Beltane and Salman, all that, that'll be coming out within the next couple of months, and all this advanced mathematics. So you guys are really kind of ahead of the curve on the revelation of these discoveries.
Yeah, man, for sure. Yeah, this is kind of all set up to lead into what we had talked about earlier, and you just alluded to again. And I had not heard of the Beltane. So Ben had before we started. He knew immediately what that was. So dive into that for everybody and explain what this May 1st alignment that you've discovered in all this, and how that all goes together from. And this should be pretty crazy based on what Ben was telling me.
Okay, well, Beltane is the first day of summer to the pagans, the witches, and the Celts, and that goes back to the Levant and Baal worship. Beltane is originally, that word is going to have its etymological root in Baalism, Baal, which we hear about a lot in the Bible. So it's the first day of summer. And it's the time of the year when the god and goddess were of equal power, that the masculine and the feminine energies are reunited. So it's symbolically, with the date, it is the sacred marriage of opposites. It is the circle and the square in a date, not being exercised in sacred geometry, but the date in itself is the religion of the sacred marriage, of the equal of the male and the female goddesses, or god and goddess. So that is the origin of May 1.
Okay.
And then we'll have Salmon too. I mean, that's October 31st. So the solar opposite of May 1 is October 31. So we have May 1. May, we just look at that word. May is Ma. Ma is a Sumerian word for mother. That's where that word comes from. It's actually a Sumerian word. I mean, that's where we get that word, is Ma. Ma is from the Sumerian. So May. And then we look at May, and it's more of a life, birth, fertility, so all that kind of. Then Salmon, solar opposite. Salmon is seen as a time when the door to the other world is opened, and the souls of the dead and other things are able to come over into this world. So that's where you're going from the material to the spiritual. So the material is the square and the spiritual is the circle. Start at the material and the circle. When you move into the square and you move to the circle, now you're into the spiritual world. This being manifested through sacred geometry, but as the date goes, it is being celebrated by October 31st. So, everybody knows that, Halloween is a kind of a pagan holiday, but it has its roots. You can celebrate Halloween, but if you go to the Hinge on October 31st, you're there.
Yeah, wow.
You're living it. You're in it. You are in the portal. You are in the portal on the day. So you're there. It's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing, you're there. You're in it. That is the gateway. The only known gateway in North America, but that is what it was built for. And I mentioned, there wasn't a whole lot going inside of it, but outside of that earthwork, there's a lot of paranormal activity going on.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to come back to that. You had made that comment earlier. Yeah. Why do you think inside of that octagonal area and the hinge area, it's kind of dead in there, and then you get outside of it? Like, what do you think that is?
I don't know. It was somewhat befuddling when we were there. We thought maybe it was the sacred and the profane.
Yeah.
The inside
Yeah,
is so
I
sacred
wondered
you
that.
can't, they can't
Yeah.
go there.
Mhm.
But outside is where it is. But maybe you can portal like through it, but then you're coming
Yeah.
out. So the spirits aren't residing in it. They're coming out. Now it was strange. Now, because a couple years ago, I was with Newark Paranormal, and we went inside of the hinge, and they had an obelisk that made shapes, and it was kept being an arrow.
Mhm.
I wonder if we could figure that out. But then, later when I went and all the activity was out, it's like, yeah, the arrow's pointing out. You got to be
Yeah,
out of here.
right.
Or it was saying, get out.
Wow.
Symbolically, it was like, arrow, get
Yeah.
out. You're not supposed to be doing paranormal in this sacred
Yeah.
area. All of the souls are on the outside, which is what we found when I just went back this last winter. But that's where you're going to get your EVPs, and you're going to get your mel meters or
Mhm.
your different devices that go outside of it, not so much inside. So it would be interesting, to do paranormal investigation on October 31 at this site. I asked her, like, where are you going to go for Halloween? As long as we have a clear evening.
Did you do any voice
Yeah, this
recordings?
is the place to be is
Yeah.
go to Newark. And so I'd like to see that. I'm sure it's going to be full of pagans
Yeah,
and witches and paranormal people are going to be there. And what's nice about it is, though, I mean, to actually see, and we'll get to the slides where you're going to see the alignments, but the sun moves so slow that if it's cloudy that night on October 31, and it's going to line with the gateway about 3 or 4 days out, before and after October
Yeah.
31. If you just want to go and see the sun align. But I mean, October 31, whether it's cloudy or not, I mean, that's the day when it happens. That's when the energy is going to be at its
Wow.
peak.
Yeah, you'd asked a question about
Yeah. Did
recording.
you guys do any voice recordings also there?
Yes, and we got an EVP, and I didn't buy an obulus because I didn't believe that whoever's there is going to be speaking
Yeah.
English. So we did get a voice, but it was unintelligible, which
Yeah.
it should be. So I don't know if it's. I put it through. A translator. I put it through Hebrew, and I couldn't get anything, but it might have been something close to that, like Aramaic, which Newark Paranormal had got a voice and sent that to me, and the best I could tell that was Aramaic.
Mm.
So it's linked to Hebrew, but it might just been
Yeah.
a dialect that my recorder was
Right.
not getting. But it's not going to be. It's probably not going to be English. I'm not
Yeah,
thinking.
no,
It
it
just
doesn't
didn't
make
make
sense.
sense to me to buy an obulus and have it create words. Like, it's not going to create English words.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of suspect on the obulus. It's like, well, we believe spirits can manipulate. It's like, man, I have a hard time figuring out how this thing works. When the spirits go in there and make
Right.
words up, like, how's that
Right.
all working? It's not like there's a lever in there to
Yeah.
pull this word, pull that word. That would be a lot more easy to believe than that somehow they're able to enter into an electronic device.
Yeah.
So anyway, I didn't get one of those, but I thought whatever it was, I tried to get things like, I'm not thinking of it. It's not the mel meter. It's the, the differences in,
Yeah.
electromagnetic
Mhm.
Yeah.
fields. So I got round thing,
Kind of like an electrospectrometer or something like that.
Yeah.
Deal.
Well, it's measuring the electromagnetic fields, and if there's a disruption in that, the buzzer goes off. Well, to me, that would seem like it's legitimate, because here we're outside. I'm not near lights. I'm not near traffic light. I'm not near anything electronic. So anything disruptions in the electromagnetic field would seem to be legit. Any voices you're getting as far as EVPs would appear to be legitimate. I did have a SLS camera, and that picked up stuff, stick figures. And so, there's entities running around. And I always think those are kind of legit too, because, you got to watch out, because if it's somewhat rectangular, it may try to matrix into what it looks like. Now I'm talking about the dot people, dot for your head, a dot for your neck, some dots across your chest, dots all down your arms, which is the technology they use to play like tennis or baseball, something on your games. So it's, matrixing these dots, but it has to ricochet off of something. So it's ricocheting off these entities. And so you'll get things walking around and doing crazy things. And you're just asking, it's like, well, what's it bouncing off of? Well, if there's nothing in front of you but air, it's really hard to explain that. So, we got those as well. Wow. So it is paranormal rich. Man. And nobody has really gone to these, it's, the whole paranormal world has just gone upside down. It's crazy. It's so bad that, it's people that go to like a location. Now, who is talking about how haunted this location is? The people who own it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Should have been here. We were here. Then we heard these voices. And then this happened. Then the lights went off. And then there was banging on the walls. And then the doors shook. And all this stuff's happening. Of course, they want to tell you that because they want you to believe it's haunted. Because they're going to charge your group $500 for the night. So that's kind of what people are doing now. But you can go to one of these sites for free. But you're dealing with some bad things.
Right.
You go to these sites.
Yeah.
I mean, I have, where do I have that at my ready here? Where is it? Oh, well, I have, I carry the Seal of Solomon with me when I go. Oh, here it is. Hold on. Because Solomon was the demon slayer in one of the Apocryphal books. So here, this.
Oh, wow.
But you have to invoke the power of Solomon before you even step forward to these sites. The Solomon, not in the, the chopped down version of the Bible that most people, take to church with them. This is the real Bible. This is Jesus's Bible. But Solomon was the demon slayer, so he's a good person to invoke the power of. If you're going to go to one of these sites, for protection. So I would encourage that, and not to just go on your own. But it's not, you just can't put it in your pocket. I mean, you actually have to, ask for the protection when you get there. Just like, thinking that wearing a cross is going to protect you in some sort of demonic. It's like, no. One, you have to be a believer, and two, you have to invoke that power going in.
Yeah. We talk all the time on this show how, like you go to these mounds and stuff, or you could go back like you go to Serpent Mound and you see this coven of witches, or if you go on the 31st Halloween, you go, to, this particular site, you're going to see people who are steeped in very heavy belief in the occult. They believe it. They have seen it. They can exercise it, and they know, right? Whereas on our side of the coin, we're so desensitized, and we're so weak in our belief system and our faith that we're just babies compared to where they are. It's sad. It's really sad. We talk about this all the time on the show of how ill-equipped we are to fight against some of this stuff because we just live in the dark and then we just are weak. So very much to your point of what you're saying.
Absolutely. Tucking a Bible underneath your arm and sitting at church on your phone for an hour and a half once a week, this isn't gonna get it done. That might make you feel good, but you're really missing the point.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the same way of wearing a cross, or something like that, are you, it's more than that, but it's kind of like a badge, but I'm just saying that, from what we're talking about, that you decide you want to go to these ancient sites and, practice divination, which is somewhat frowned upon in the Bible, as you guys know. But I did it because I have something to prove. So my whole thing is proving Genesis 6:4 to be true. And to say these were the sons of God, and that these spirits, according to the book of Enoch, are condemned to be earthbound. And so I don't know, I just feel like I'm working for the church, so I can maybe take some liberties that maybe are not available to others, because I'm not really doing it for recreation. I'm doing it to prove a point.
Yeah. And I know you had talked about wanting to kind of rewind a little bit and look at some of these alignments. I have your other things that you sent me here ready to go if you want me to throw them on the screen. It's the, I think the alligator alignment here. So let me pull this back up and you can kind of share on that. But yeah, man, it's amazing how the encouraging thing, I'll just say this before we kind of dive in here, but I will say the encouraging thing, and hopefully you're seeing this too, is that there is an awakening that it seems to be happening within the church and within people to this stuff. The fact that this stuff is real and it's not make believe. It's not, and they're starting to break away from the narrative that the stupid, ridiculous narrative, like things like, oh, it was a 1,000-year-old Indian shaman that decided to come up with all this stuff, and he was magical with a slide rule, and all this ridiculous stuff. People are not buying it anymore. They're not buying it, and so they're starting to wake up. So I'll just say that and let you take off wherever you want to go with that. But I got your thing pulled up here.
Yeah, just like in the church, like most people don't realize, just this, I'm talking about the circle and the square, symbolism in the church. Like when you look at how your church is built, when you look at the church windows, those are Vesica Piscas. Now, what's a Vesica Pisca? You take two circles and you draw a circle inside the other circle. And in that, that's the Vesica Pisca, the vessel of the fish. Like you see a Jesus fish on the back of a car. That's, if you kept drawing that, it would be two circles. And that's where they overlap one another. Now, the length to height ratio of a Vesica Pisca is something, and I forget this. Is it 240? But whatever the ratio is the same amount of fish Christ caught when he was on his fishing expedition. But that number was used in the length to height ratio of the Vesica Pisca. So whatever one of those two numbers correlates with the number of fish that Jesus caught. And this is part of the Essenes Christians. And they were into math. And a little bit still in the Bible. But that's one place right there. Now, a lot of times you'll see Christ depicted in the Vesica Pisca because that shape also represents the female vulva. So it's related to regeneration and birth and different things. But it's the concept of being reborn. So when you're sitting in church and you notice how the steeple comes up in that shape, That is representing your soul ascending to heaven, and you're going to be reborn. And just the building. I mean, your church is talking to you. Your windows in the church are talking to you. You're sitting in the church. The church itself is talking to you, but nobody's listening because they don't know what the hell they're looking at.
We're deaf to it.
It's just, I mean, it's just it's over their head. But it's sad because people should tell them that. See how this temple is built? This is a Vesca. That's what our windows are, Vesca. This all represents your soul ascending to heaven. That's why you're here. That's why we have the circle and the square. That's why we're going to take you and manifest you from the earthly realm to the spiritual realm. So really the circle and the square is our version of the church. We're going to transform. Well, you're going to be from the material to the spiritual. You're spiritual, then they pass the plate. Now you're back to the material. And once that goes through, now we'll go back to the spiritual. So this is kind of a lead-in. The alligator mound, it's not an alligator, it's a salamander. So think of May 1 in the Ohio Valley. The weather starts getting warmer. So what emerges at that time? You'd see your salamanders. So the salamander would be symbolic of spring, or as the pagans would say, May 1 being the first day of summer. And this is in Granville. And this is only about 4 or 5 miles from the Henge. It's aligned to May 1, which we'll get to. So May 1st is its head. And then October 31st would be its tail. I was there for May 1st. That'll probably be the next slide. So I'm going to show you the May 1 effigy mound on the morning of May. Well, okay, that's a Henge. That's fine. We'll just go to these, whatever you got. All right, this is the Henge at Newark that we've talked about. This is October 31st. So this is the alignment. This is sunset. So you can see how that is lined up perfectly with that gate. So there's no doubt. It's right coming down the middle. So this is my discovery that this earthwork, because, I've always talked about these ties with, the Amorites and, the Celtic religion is basically, they got that from, the Amorites and the ancient religions that began in the Levant, which they practice. But the Celts, of course, this is telling October 31, sunset. So this is when the veil is at its largest. It's wide open for the spirits to come through there and for you to practice divination and bring those ghosts and spirits through this gateway right here. So pretty cool. It's actually cooler to see the sun set on this earthwork than the sunrise. And, you're not up so early in the morning and, it's usually cold. But you can really see it. The sun's just a lot bigger in the sky. I'm sure maybe some May 1s it is a little bit bigger in the sky than when I was there. But pretty magical thing to see. And this is new. So you folks listening and, seeing this graphic, you were some of the first in the world to see this discovery.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Thanks for sharing with us. We really appreciate it. It's amazing, man. It's just every single one of these sites that we find this stuff, man. It's all of them. It's as we dive into even the pyramids and just everything. It's all around the world. We find that there's always this celestial and alignment with the sun in some form and fashion. No matter where we find these sites, it's of any kind. It's always like this. It's kind of amazing, man. They knew what they were doing. There's no way that this is all accidental.
Oh, no, absolutely not. And, what's incredible is that
come back to it.
I'm the first to discover it. That nobody was there on October 31st and said, hey,
yeah,
aligned.
They're too busy doing their rituals, man.
And if you're standing there, Yeah, there's no doubt. There's just no doubt
Yeah,
with what
right.
you're looking at there. And like, well, all right, great, great. I'm glad
Yeah,
I was
man.
able to find it before anybody else. But there
That's
it is,
crazy, dude.
Halloween night.
Wow.
And I imagine this place at this time, because see, there's not one person
Yeah.
here. I hope very soon that there's hundreds and hundreds of people here on October 31st.
Yeah.
Like I said, full of paranormal people, witches, druids, everybody that's into this type of religion. And, witchcraft, and when you're talking about earth witches, it's pretty harmless. It's just kind of this, it's the spiritual of the gods and the goddesses and earth spirits and energy from, rocks and, different things like that. It's pretty harmless. But then there's, dark witches, that are into the dark stuff, and that's pretty scary. So I don't know. You never know who's going to show up, but it's good and bad.
Yeah,
and all
man.
things.
Those are the ones that are the believers, man. Those are the ones that can actually commune and summon stuff. We've had some really interesting discussions on our show. Like one of them comes to mind is Mike Lake, whose episode is actually coming out or came out. It's coming out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And in that episode, he actually talks about how, he was under his family. He was under attack by witches. And, one of them jumped in the car with his wife and summoned something on the spot. And just crazy, man. They can do it. It's scary stuff, but we want to just pretend it's just all make believe and it's fairy tale stuff. And, oh, that's just old Indian folklore. And it's just crazy,
Yeah.
Grandpa Tonto, who lived 1,000 years, and would you say earlier? What are we going to trademark for you? What did you call it? Tonto Angelo. Oh, there it is, man. There it is. Well, brother, thanks.
Hey, yeah, good. The Native Americans out there, we're
I
just
know.
joking.
Calm down. Good grief. Go fight with the Washington Redskins.
Dakota Sioux were there, but
Yeah.
I'm really the only person that's out there promoting that these earthworks, are Dakota Sioux,
Yeah.
and that universities need to give the thousands of skeletons that they have in boxes at the university. You need to give those back. See, there's a stipulation in NAGPRA, Native American Grave Protection Act, is that it only applies to known tribes. So as long as academia refuses to say that the Hopo or the Dakota Sioux, they're no longer a known tribes, and they can hang on to all the skeletal remains that they have.
There you go.
And continue digging.
Game trickery.
So the mounds can't be protected because they're not a known tribe, and all the skeletons that they have dug remain in university boxes because they're not a known tribe. So it's just one more criminal aspect of the university archaeologists.
Well, don't a lot of the Indian tribes, don't a lot of them say, man, we didn't build that. That was here before we got here.
Well, that's what's, somewhat upsetting. It's like, you're going to see all sorts of signs at the Serpent Mound saying it's Shawnee. Well, it's not Shawnee. It's not Algonquin. It's not Shawnee. Chief Cornstalk, one of the most famous Shawnee chiefs, said that was there before they arrived. Oh. We have no evidence that at 200 AD that the Shawnee were anywhere near southern Ohio. We do know the Dakota Sioux were there, but not the Shawnee. So what it comes down to, it's like, well, the historic tribe around there was Shawnee. So if you're a dumb, woke, Jew-hating, Hamas-loving communist, you're going to say, well, it belongs to the Shawnee because that's
just the easiest thing.
Nothing based.
Yeah.
Right. Not based in fact. It's just the woke response. And we need to get away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woke isn't the truth. Woke is what's expedient not to hurt anybody's feelings because they want to believe it's their history. But what I'm showing you with Pythagorean, triangles and May 1 and October 31, it's like, no, this, we need to think out of the box.
Yeah, we'd even skipped over the one that was kind of, I'm just going to pull this up really quick to show it. because we didn't touch on this one, but just to prove your point of what you're talking about, not that we haven't already proven it 50 times over, but look at this. I mean, look at the math going on here, man. I mean, there's just no way that somebody, a hunter gatherer or a more primitive Indian who is working came up with this. I mean, there's just no way. It's insane.
Well,
Yeah.
what we're seeing here is surveying
Yes.
skills. Now, on this map, from the center of the octagon to the center of the hinge, that's where we're showing the alignments. Geller Hill. Now, Geller Hill is the highest point of land in that area. So not real, I mean, it's only a 30-foot hill. And there's burial mounds on top of this. So Geller Hill is basically the axis mundi to the whole site. Because you can see that from Geller Hill to the circle is 7,392 feet. And from Geller Hill to the middle of the octagon is 7,392 feet. And that makes it perfect isosceles triangle.
65 degrees and
you would have,
on the tuba.
Yeah, both 65 degrees.
Wow, man.
Yeah. So the angles are right and the length is right. And the only way that you could have done that is if you were able to survey. You had to be able to survey. It's 1.5 miles distant, and you cannot see the earthworks from Geller Hill. I mean, it looks like it on a map like that. It looks like everything's together. But when you start thinking about the immensity of the size of these earthworks. Now, the octagon, you see that line going straight through that. That angle is at 51.2 degrees, which kind of, and this might just be, I don't know, coincidence. I don't know. But it's the angle of the pyramid of the Great Pyramid is at an angle of 51.2. Interesting similarity in the pitch, but every one of those gateways there to that octagon is pointed to a lunar standstill. And that arrow that's going through the middle of that, in May of this month, it only happens every 18.6 years, but the full moon is going to rise right on that middle of the gate.
This year.
And that's coming up May of this year. Yeah. I think it's like the 15th or 16th, something like that. And the Ohio Historical Society was saying months ago, it's like, well, we might have to limit the people coming in there to just Native Americans. What? You can't do that, you racist bastard. You can't. This is America. You can't say that. I'm sorry. You people here, you can watch out in the parking lot, but you can't come in here. You can't do that. And it's like, besides, how do you know?
Yeah, right.
Native
Like
American.
I think my great grandmother was like, what's the cutoff? My great grandmother was like full Blackfoot Indian. Nobody's gonna know that. Like, that's true. Like, I don't look the least bit Indian at all. I'm hungry Indian, but
I went to a powwow and the shaman was some dude from Denmark. Like, what? Well, that's it. Well, I'm the shaman. Like, do you have any Native American blood? No, I'm from Denmark. Well, who cares?
Oh my goodness!
It's all non-profit.
It's all insane, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I got a cool like calico Indian-looking shirt, and I got some, cool shoes,
moccasins.
Indian
moccasins. There you go, man.
Dude, all right, you want to be shaman? Then set up camp. So anyway, that was the dude I was talking to. He was talking about swatting bees with me, but so that's happening this year. This will be happening in May. That'd be really cool to see. That'll be a full moon, and that'll rise right on that. It'll rise right up on that gateway, and it will align. See, there's two parallels that connect the octagon, which we know was built to have a square on the inside of that. So there too, we're going with this sacred marriage. So you're going from the circle to the square. And so there in that in between is kind of that manifestation of two worlds, of the spiritual and the absolutely. I know that's going to play out, there, and no more so than when that alignment happens. That lunar alignment. So, yeah, that only happens every 18.6 years, and that'll be this
Wow.
May. But yeah, it's just another piece of math, and you ask yourself. I mean, you may say that it's racist to say that it's anyone but Native Americans, but it's like, I've done deep dive research. Like, man, if there is any window where we want to put this in a more of a Native American camp, or we can say that this tribe was practicing these dates, or maybe had serving or something, but it's just not.
Yeah, there was
It's
another
not there.
site. This kind of reminds me of it. That was incorporated a mound. It was featured in the newest Ancient Apocalypse, the Americas, and I want to say it was down in Virginia, maybe. But it was very similar to this, where like you have this high point that was actually a mound, but then you have these amphitheaters, or maybe they were octagons or something like that that were specifically almost like this. They were designed and they were really far away. There's no way that they could have seen where they were, putting things. They had to survey and do it in a way where they had to use some kind of more advanced mathematics and technology in order to make all this stuff perfectly aligned. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. It was not some unintelligent people that, just got lucky.
Right. And just got lucky. And that, like the Pythagorean triangle, or for it to be laid out like this. And, we have the solar, lunar, observations. Well, just to build the octagon, it was 18.6 years, just to get that right. But I mean, think how many years you're going to have a cloud.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. If you have one day of bad weather, you're shot.
Especially, oh, yeah. And when we're talking winter, it's, in the Midwest, it's cloudy 5 days of the week. So any of those lunar standstills that are showing up in the winter months, how many years on this cycle before you get it right and you actually get the alignment correct. So we're talking, which again dismisses Tano from doing it, because it probably would take 5 or 6 cycles, about 100 years
exactly.
before they got, each of the angles right. And it's not a perfect octagon. There are some walls that are smaller than the others, but I mean, it was all made to line up to these lunar standstills. And when you're there, I mean, yeah, you can look across the golf course and see the wall on the other side, but how do you check your work?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you know that this wall is like, lining up with this, because it's so far apart? And the only way is what we're looking at now, and that is you're looking at these from the air. They were all built. The Serpent Mound was made to be seen from the air. These were made to be seen from the air.
Yeah.
Really the sacred geometry comes to light when you look at it from the air. And so these were definitely made for the gods, and these gods were, in the heavens. And these were
we see this all over the globe too. Nazca and the Nazca lines, all these places. You're on the ground. You won't even sometimes even know that you're there. You're just so on top of it. So yeah, it's kind of amazing. Wow, man. Well, thanks for sharing with us today, man.
Yeah.
You've made some amazing discoveries for sure and for certain.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, and it's exciting that see what people think about this. Is that you guys are really kind of on the cutting edge, because Marzulli, I mean, certainly has a bigger footprint than I do.
Us too.
So we're going to see when this gets out to the masses, and look forward to see what the academic response to all this is as well. Since they've already got on board with the Pythagorean triangles, how are they going to get out of this?
Yeah, exactly.
And explaining it in a woke manner. Well, we know what they're woke.
Nobody.
I don't think
The ones with brain cells banging together aren't buying it anymore. We've been awakened to the lying, and there's been a lot of lying. If you want to see some lying, go turn your TV on right now and just watch the news. You'll see all kinds of lying going down.
Yep,
from every which aspect.
Guys.
But Fritz, man, it was great talking to you, man. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad we got things worked out with sound.
Yeah, man.
Everything. But Kyle, man, it's great talking with you, and we'll see what shakes out of the tree with these discoveries. So have a good evening, and thanks everyone for listening. And if you want more on this, I really did the deep dive in my latest book, which is Ancient America,
Absolutely.
The Dark Side. So if you want more information on a lot of what we've talked about, Ancient America, The Dark Side, available on Amazon. You can go there, and for $14.99, you're really going to get.
I would highly encourage it. And again, when the regular podcast episode comes out, we will have a guest page for Fritz, and we will have his books affiliate linked on there, so you can get it through our site as well, the tfhc.com/guests.
Oh.
But I know for you too, I know we talked about this where we have NephilimGiants.net, so you can actually find out more about Fritz over there, NephilimGiants.net. And then do you have a page just for that book you just mentioned, Fritz?
No, just
Okay,
Amazon
gotcha.
page. I got a description of the book, and that's where you're going to buy it and get the best, free
There you go.
delivery and
Yep.
all that stuff.
So head over to Amazon and get your copy now, y'all. You won't be sorry. So,
No.
all right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks very much, man. We appreciate it again.
All right.
All right.
All right,
With
guys.
that,
All right. You guys
you
have a
too,
good
man.
night.
We will bid everybody adieu
All right.
until next time on The Foil. Take care, all.
bye.
Thanks, guys.
I think we all get the feeling that something just isn't right in the world. Welcome, fellow foilers, to the Tin Foil Hat Club, where we dare to discuss all the things we don't talk about in church. And where yesterday's fiction becomes tomorrow's fact.
When you've got a government that's lying to your face, controlling the information through the media that it owns, that's not a recipe for peace in a civilization.
Atomic. The electromagnetic waves affecting our planet.
Megalithic cyclopean sites.
Anderson Cooper, intern for the CIA.
Watchers in the days of Noah.